Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast for agency owners, hosted by agency veteran and coach Steve Guberman. Agency Bytes is a podcast focused on delivering actionable agency information from agency experts in about 25 minutes. Why 25 minutes? Because who has the attention span for much more these days? And you can squeeze in a listen between meetings with time for a bathroom break or coffee refill before your next meeting.
Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast dedicated to helping agency owners thrive. I'm Steve Guberman from Agency Outsight, where I coach creative entrepreneurs to build the business of their dreams. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome LinkedIn phenom Kevin Rapp to the show. Kevin is the co-founder and chief creative officer of the creative agency Ultra Friends. He's an accomplished creative leader with almost 2 decades of experience in the field, and he's built a mild reputation for himself by shouting into the internet void on LinkedIn. Kevin, it is really great to see you. Awesome to meet you, and thank you for joining me today.
Likewise. Great to be here, buddy. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to dig into kind of the exploitation of creatives, which is how we met. You know, you had posted something, a bit of a talk that you gave about pitching free work, and it created a massive storm of conversations and comments, and so I had to reach out because I like that kind of energy, and plus you had a sick jacket on, so...
The velour did not hurt anybody.
Yeah. Does it ever? Come on. Yeah.
No.
Give kind of a backstory. Like, what's your path to where you are now?
Yeah. So my background is in video advertising. I started as an animator way back in the day. Been doing advertising and making video content for almost 20 years now, and worked my way up the studio pipeline, for the first decade of my career, starting to refine the craft and then learning how to be an art director and how to direct and bring artists together to enhance the work. And then made a pivot in my career about 8-ish years ago, where I went from the agency and studio world and transitioned in-house, which was a really interesting directional shift for me. And not just going in-house, but I went in-house at a fast-growing startup, which is a very unique environment to learn how to market in. So when I joined, we were a 100-person Series B startup, and within 3 years, we were an 1,800-person public company.
Wow.
So just insane mega growth.
What sector was that in?
It was in insurance. So It was an insurance startup that built an app that could measure people's driving ability and then use that to give people prices that were more accurate to their driving ability. Because most insurance is based on your credit score, your marital status, your income, right? Things that do not tell you whether you're going to rear end somebody, right? So being able to measure, whether you pick up your phone while you drive or how hard you brake is more deterministic of how likely you are to get into an accident. So it was a really interesting product, and bringing more equity to a financial product that most people are legally required to own. So there was a really interesting story that we could pull back there, and gave us some opportunity to tell really interesting advertising stories that, in a space that is usually filled with mascots and savings messages only, just was a really interesting challenge to figure out how to make that marketable to the public.
What was that kind of culture shock shift from agency space to in-house startup in-house? Because startup's a whole other animal altogether.
100%. The shift from studio to in-house alone would have been a pretty crazy shock, but in a world where priorities shift every day, you're trying to learn what messages are resonating with the audience. It feels like every week something completely new is popping up and an entirely different fire is happening. It was quite a pressure cooker, but one that I, as a person who kind of thrives on pressure and thrives on and gets bored easily, got a lot of energy out of and got a lot to learn out of it. The biggest shift for me was learning how to realize that the craft wasn't the only thing that mattered. I think in a creative space, growing up in creative studios, the craft is the thing that you are taught. It is the thing that you're incentivized on. It is the thing that people are training you to try and refine. But the craft alone isn't value. And that's something that you learn really, really quickly when you get into the startup world, and being on the other side is that they are much more interested in how you are delivering value to the business and less interested in how your creative concepts are mature and refined and reflective of are pushing the needle and pushing the envelope, right? Like the actual creative itself is less of a priority for these businesses. They are much more interested in how is this going to deliver a return on investment, which is a reasonable question.
Yeah.
And so I had to retrain my brain a little bit to learn how to talk about the work, and how do I position the work, and how do I structure the way I think about how I produce content for this business. And it was less about, okay, what is the great idea? What's the big idea that I have to push back on this brief, right? How do I bounce off of this brief and come back with an idea that really is the most exciting, dynamic idea that is going to blow people away in a pitch? And I then had to position myself to more think of like, is this brief even the right solution for the problem we're trying to solve? Which is a really different way to think.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to retrain your brain. And it's almost like, and not to call you this in any way, but the person that focuses on the big idea, it's almost a prima donna of the artwork and not about the business side of creativity, which you're saying is the number one, priority.
That's what the CEO cares about, right? Yeah. The CEO, like, yes, he'll like that his brand looks exciting and dynamic, and if it gets awards and if it gets attention, but ultimately the thing that they're gonna measure our success on is, did you accomplish the 15% brand awareness that we talked about? Did you drive conversions? Those are the things that really matter to the people in charge. And learning how to position how that creative can have an impact on those results, because it can. It has a tremendous impact on those business results. Learning how to change the language and the way I talked about it really impacted my career in pretty profound ways. It impacted the way I think about the work. It impacted the way I start a project, but it also impacted my career trajectory, because the better I got at communicating the core value of creativity, the more people recognized my contributions, and the more that I got seen as somebody who was impacting the business, and the better raises I got, the better my career trajectory financially went. So it was a pretty important shift for my brain to be a better advocate for what I do and why it matters.
So that was your time at the startup where you personally took it from 100 to 1,800 people and taking it public all by yourself. Then what was next in your career?
It was all me. I did it all. There was absolutely nobody else involved. Please, all the credit, all the applause. No, the business actually did some pretty amazing things. We raised $750 million on the IPO launch day. It's to this day the largest IPO in Ohio's history, which is pretty remarkable. And in the insurance space, which is a very crowded market that is hard to break into, we really found a pretty powerful marketing message that really helped that business grow traction. Tripled policy counts, all the things. And from there, I really had recognized that the contributions that I made were not just like, I built a really cool department within a company. I really went and thought, I think I built a business model. I think I figured out how to operationalize creative and figure out how to deliver the most value to a business in ways that I think are really marketable to other companies. And so I just started by just kind of testing the waters on LinkedIn to say, here's some things that I think about how we can develop creative, how we can optimize what we deliver to brands to help them grow in a more saturated marketing industry than ever before. And that led me to starting a business that really grew pretty quickly in a way that I really did not expect. So we have picked up some pretty impressive clients like Netflix and Google, and we've been able to do some really great campaigns for companies. And they really just started by me going, all right, I think I want to try this and see what happens. And I've been very fortunate to see the business grow. So we're now a 2-person agency called Ultra Friends that we bring in contractors to help us with all of the work that we're executing. Everything from video campaigns to branding to full-on marketing campaigns and UX design. So we do a lot of everything, but I think the thing that has kind of we've gotten to be known for is really optimizing the way we produce creative content through systems to give brands more value for their creative investment.
So that's your core offering, core differentiator, because there are a zillion agencies out there. So many sound the same, look the same, smell the same. Your differentiator is the system that you developed, or kind of a set of systems, probably through the startup space. Yeah. Interesting model, and a lot of it relies on some core values that you believe firmly in.
100%.
Talk about some of those, because I think that's vital.
Yeah. So when I was in-house, one of the things that we learned is one of the things that I always felt is that if brands just invested more upfront in generating assets that were more branded, they would be able to produce more efficiently. If we had a full suite of illustrations and motion design transitions and all of these things, if we had like a library of content up front, we could produce so much more for them in so much more efficient ways. And I'd always had this theory, but I'd never been able to test it because we could never sell it. We always say,
who's going to pay for it? Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Who's going to pay for it? Because we could never show the value if we never actually do it. And so when I got in charge of the purse strings of how we manage our production budget, I said, okay, I've got these theories. I'm going to test them out. And that's when I started to produce so much more content, because I was thinking about things up front. How do we produce live action content in bulk? How do we capture a bunch of content so that we have libraries and almost like a stock library of branded assets?
Yeah.
And when we looked at the production over a year, it's like we saved the company $5 million a year in production costs based on the output that we delivered. And what does that do for them? It gives them more content that they can test, which lets them find more high performers. It just gives them so many more opportunities to test messaging, to learn more about what assets are or aren't working. And then we can optimize even more to deliver more content that is going to drive the business forward. And I think that is what led us to the success that the business had. We had so many more opportunities to find what of our message was working, and we were able to react to customers quicker because we were not going back to every brief every time there was something new that needed to be created. It was like, okay, cool, you have this brief. I've got probably 20 different assets over here on the shelf. Which do you think fits this campaign best? I think it's this one.
Interesting.
So if I look back on some of the values that the agency has been founded upon, it is we are here to solve the problem. We're not here to make just pretty pictures. Of course, we're going to make pretty pictures as part of the process, but at the end of the day, we're here to solve the problem. And we view ourselves as creative thinkers that can bring solutions that a lot of other creatives can't, because they don't have the experience that we have being in the space, knowing how to do it, and learning from those results. So we really do think about creativity in the way that the C-suite thinks about how creative should be valued. And I think that has naturally led to another initiative or another value that we really lean upon, which is creative is highly valued at our agency. We value the creative instincts that we have. We believe that the concept and the execution and the work that we create that motivates people to make behavior change is one of the biggest levers your business can pull.
Yeah.
And if it is going to deliver massive results for your business, we think that it should be valued appropriately. And so we push to have a seat at the table. We push to be part of the strategy conversations. We push for ourselves and our collaborators to be compensated appropriately. We value what we bring, and we think that it has tremendous business value, and we seek out partners who value creativity.
Are these non-negotiables in entering into agreements with clients?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are ways in which we have pretty much refined that process. And one thing that is probably the LinkedIn post that started this conversation is that we do not pitch for free. We do not develop spec creative as part of the pitch process in a way that's uncompensated. I think that is a way to really negate the value of creativity when you start a relationship. If you're going into this relationship and they are already telling you that the concept is worth $0 until we decide that it's one that we think is valuable and will pay for you to execute it, I think it's just setting off a dynamic that is unhealthy from the jump. It is setting an expectation that we are not experts. It is setting an expectation that this thing that is possibly the most valuable thing that we have to offer is not valuable at all. And I just think that is a really unhealthy dynamic to have. I don't think we can ever truly be a trusted partner if we enter into a relationship where that is the dynamic. And so we have made that a non-negotiable for us.
Good. I love that. I celebrate that. I encourage that. I remember in the early aughts, there was the no spec movement. I don't think it made its way up to larger agencies, but I know small, mid-sized agencies, fully embraced it. Almost to the point of throwing shame on the smaller agencies that went against it and said, "Oh, you're going to throw free creative." So I support it. I support it for small agencies. I don't know if you listen to Two Bobs, the David C. Baker and Blair Enns podcast.
No, I haven't.
They dug into the 4As had a report earlier. I guess it was earlier in 2024, talking about the cost of pitching in our industry, and obscene numbers, hundreds of millions of dollars based on man hours, person hours, to do free pitching to possibly win work. And the just the idea behind the concept of why would I pitch for free? Why would I enter into this RFP process? The idea, the percentage of chance that you have of winning it, even if your creative is stellar, like all these metrics that just mind blowing. But then you have the large holding companies. That's how they win the multi-million-dollar businesses.
That's how they do it.
Yeah.
Right? And so it becomes a systemic factor.
Yes.
Right? It becomes a systemic part of the advertising culture, which makes it hard to push against.
Yep. And
it's one of many systemic factors that I think have impacted the way creativity is valued culturally. I think of how this starts when we're kids, right? Like when we start to think about doing something creative, it's really valued until you decide that it's going to be your profession, right? It starts with, oh, I love that you're being so creative. I'm going to see your name in the movie credits one day. And then the second you start to say, okay, cool, I'm going to pursue that, they go, well, what's your fallback plan? Right? It's immediately like the starving artist archetype pops up into everyone's mind the second you start to think that creative is a viable career path. And I think that continues throughout an artist's career. It follows them throughout their careers in myriad ways. Pitching for free is one of them. The being paid in exposure bucks to do a project is another.
Absolute hard no. Yeah.
Absolute hard no. There's so many ways. Like creatives have a harder time fighting to get raises because their work is so subjective. There are just all of these factors that make it difficult for creatives to truly advocate for themselves because demonstrating their value is challenging. We're often isolated from the metrics. We're often isolated from some of the business conversations. And so it's hard for us to say we're worth more.
Yeah. I also think there's an interesting psychological point to our abilities to fight for more, whether it's, we devalue ourselves, we don't have the confidence, but yet so many creatives, we've got the biggest egos on any given day also, but I'm afraid to charge what I think it's worth, and the dynamic there is just so painful to experience. I've been there, I know tons of creatives that have been there. Yeah.
Because this isn't just a job to us.
Yeah.
This is part of our identity, right? Who we are as artists inherently shapes our perception of ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes this tangled web that becomes really hard to extricate and determine our own self-worth and self-value. Because a lot of the times when we're paid way below market value, we start to internalize that. And we start to believe, oh, I am actually worth this, not just as a profession, not just where I am at my skill level, where I am in my career, but like I, as a person, am worth below the market value.
Yeah.
And it's hard to break outside of that mentality and see your true value, because you're just internalizing so many of these external cultural values.
Yeah, it beats us down. It puts negative labels on us as people and individuals. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, random two-sided question.
Please.
In the 2 years you've been running Ultra Friends, have there been opportunities where brands asked you to pitch and you said, no, we don't pitch for free, and you regret not doing it, or they've come back to you and said, fine, we'll pay you for the pitch?
Yes, there's never been one that we have pushed back and we've regretted it. Okay. Every single time that we've said no, honestly, sometimes other agencies will contact us and ask us to support on the creative development, and they're the only ones who really seem to be hung up on it. Because I think they say, well, we're pitching for free, so we can't pay to pitch anybody else. And I said, that's absolutely fair for you to make that choice. That is a choice that we have decided is not going to work for us. And sometimes they come back and say, okay, cool. Well, then we'll compensate you. We would love your support on it. And sometimes they push back and say, okay, well, then this is just not going to be a fit. And would I have enjoyed working on the work? Maybe. Would we have gotten paid in the long run if we helped them win and they brought us in to execute, whatever? Yes, maybe. But there are so many maybes that I could worry about that I would be unable to operate if I just keep wondering in maybes. So I always think of in the world of maybe they'll say no, because every single one of us is in the mindset of when we're sending off a bid or a proposal, maybe they're going to say no to this higher amount. Maybe I need to cut myself down. Maybe I need to cut myself down. I am now allowing myself to ask the question, maybe they'll say yes. When I put the higher number down, I'll say, you know what? I need to have both of those voices talking in order to advocate for myself to get what I am worth. And if I continue to devalue myself, it's just going to keep this train rolling in a way that is going to set me back. And so I'm trying to do this not just for myself, but for my collaborators, the people that I bring on board. I will never ask them to work for free either. I'm going to try and pay them above their market value. I'm going to try and do everything that I can to enable and empower creativity, because I think that is not just good for me. It's not just good for my collaborators. I think it's good for my clients, because oftentimes when I have pitched for free and when I've worked at other agencies, I'm not typically pitching the things that I think are the best work. I think I'm pitching the thing that I think they'll buy.
Big difference.
Because we need to get the return on the investment. If we're going to spend these man hours to pitch something, I'm not going to say, okay, what's the thing that's going to solve their problem? I'm saying, okay, what are they going to say yes to? And I think that does a disservice to our clients. I would much rather just say, no, we're not going to do this unless you pay us, and then try and pitch them, if they do pay us, the thing that I think is going to help them be successful.
Yeah. No, I love that. I can't tell you how many times, my experience on the agency side and then coaching agencies, it's been like, yeah, I sent this out. It was 20K. I was nervous. They said, yes, I should have charged 30K. It's like, yeah, play that through before you hit send. Add that extra 20%, add that extra 15%, because the reality is you're probably undercharging because your self-worth is screwing you up. You didn't do the right math to calculate your team, your vendor teams, your everybody else's. So there's a really good chance you're off by easily 15 to 20%.
100%. When I look back on, when you're talking about looking back on the things that I regret, I don't look back and regret pushing back and saying I'm worth more. I look back on all of the times where I undercut myself, where I censored myself from asking for more first, because I started doing the math and I stopped counting at $250,000 because I got depressed. When you start to really say, how many times did I not ask for that raise? How many times did I cut a few grand off the top? That money adds up. That money adds up to life-changing amounts of money if you really do not value yourself appropriately.
I also think it speaks volumes to the way that we approach new business and the idea of, I want that logo on my website versus let's have a conversation about budget. Are we even aligned?
Yes.
Are we aligned on budget? Are we aligned on values? Are you looking to exploit creative? Because if you are, even if I can convince you to pay for this one, what are you going to squeeze out of me next time? Or where else are we misaligned?
Yeah, it's rare that a relationship starts with a squeeze and then becomes more relaxed later. The squeeze gets tighter typically, in my experience. And so I don't want to start a relationship off with that dynamic, because I don't see it getting better. I usually see it trending worse.
Yeah, agreed. I say that a lot to agencies. Well, we're going to give them a discount for the first one. Like, why? You're not a drug dealer. The first one's not free. Charge what you deserve and set the tone from day one that this is what we're worth. And so this is why we charge it. And then send it 120%. Like, over deliver based on the value that they're paying for.
Absolutely.
You start with a discount, you're always at a discount. You're never going to be able to raise that rate.
Yep, because they're always going to question, but last time it was X. And
exactly.
What are you going to do then? Likely you're going to say, okay, we'll give it to you at this rate again.
Exactly. Yeah. Listen, I want to switch gears, jump into a couple of random rapid fire questions. I think we could talk about creative ethics for years. Big fan of this. We're going to have to meet up in Columbus or somewhere and do this.
Love this plan.
In real time.
Love this.
What's something that you can't get enough of these days? A show, a podcast, a book, a hobby, a whatever.
Okay. So I have lately been very obsessed with the X-Men. I mean, I've always been obsessed with the X-Men, at least partially, but there was a reboot of the comics in 2019 that started a new era of the comics that was just so mind-blowing in the way it changed the status quo of the comics that I just was so energized by the franchise and just went back and reread so many of the things that I loved. And then the relaunch of the cartoon from the 90s with X-Men 97 was so well done. It's just I've been having a real X-Men moment these days and have been loving it.
Oh, that's cool, man. That brings me back big time. That's very cool. What's a tool that you've recently integrated into your life? Digital, physical, personal, professional, whatever, not AI, that you look back and you think, how the heck did I live without this thing?
Not AI, never AI. The tool that I have integrated the most is Loom, actually. So sending short video messages along with like a first work in progress on something to explain the intention behind it has been a game changer for me in the ways that I communicate to my clients and to my collaborators. Being able to like break down a script and tell them, here's kind of what I'm envisioning. And it's just it's cut out so many meetings while also being more clear with what my expectations are or what my intentions were behind creative decisions. And both clients and collaborators have been like, yeah, this is great. I love this. It's actually like, I used to spend, hours on a kickoff email for a project, just describing, here's exactly what I need, here's all this stuff. And now it's like, okay, I'm going to record a 5-minute Loom video and then send you the script. And it's like, it's saving me time while providing more clarity. Like, I mean, I can't imagine something like that being how that could have improved my process, but it's been huge for me.
Yeah, I know a lot of people use it in a lot of different ways, and I think it's really, really valuable. Not to go down a rabbit hole, but do you send off creative review that way to clients, or do you only do live presentations of creative?
So I have been doing it just like if I'm sending a first work in progress, or sometimes I'll walk through a deck where it's like, oh, we can't present to this person live, or we can't present concepts. It's like, okay, cool. I'll walk them through the deck with a Loom video, or like even walking through proposals, being like, here's how we got to these numbers, and here's what you're getting for it, has I think been so much more beneficial than just sending, okay, here's the numbers, and then here's an email that you're probably not going to read because you just want to see what the number is.
Yeah.
There have been a couple of ways in which I've really integrated it into my process, and I think it's been really, really helpful.
Interesting. So I'm a staunch believer of never send a proposal out that you can't present in person, like live, Zoom or whatever. And so I wonder if what you're doing is kind of like a step in between, but what that conversion rate would be if they were taken to like live, because live you get to see their reactions, watch their eyes, like what's that number? Or, wow, that's amazing. Or you don't get that on a video delivery, just like you wouldn't if you just sent an email. So just curious about that.
Yeah, there's definitely layers of nuance between the things, and this has been one since all of my clients are remote. I have maybe like one or two in Columbus. This has been a nice middle ground to try and do asynchronous proposals. It's been a nice middle ground for me.
Dig it. Very cool. And then finally, what is an invaluable piece of creative business advice that you can share with our listeners?
Ooh, I think the thing that I would recommend the most is to really dig down and understand the true value of what you bring to the table. I think so many of us get hung up on the cosmetic aspects of what we do, the aesthetics, the concept. When you follow the thread of what that work does, what does the aesthetics bring, what does my unique point of view or perspective bring, how is that connecting to an audience that motivates them to change their perception of this brand and change their behavior? Like when you follow that thread, what we do is incredibly powerful, what we do is incredibly valuable, but we get so hung up on saying we're award-winning storytellers, right? That we often aren't the best advocates for what we do. And so I think the advice that I give to a lot of creatives is to dig a layer deeper on what it is that you truly bring to the table and understand how that provides impact to a business, and start messaging around that true value rather than just the more cosmetic aspects of what you do. Because a lot of the times we're talking to fellow creatives, we're talking to other people, we're communicating why you should want to work with us, not why you should hire us to do what we do. So that is the thing. That mentality shift has been the thing that I think has really pushed my career trajectory in a completely different direction. The ability to articulate for my true value has been, I think, the biggest game changer that I've had in my 2-decade career. And I would recommend that for every creative or studio or agency owner to really reflect on that, because I think it's vital, especially now with the rise of generative AI, with the market being even more competitive, with us having a tough market the past year and a half.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be more critical than ever that we are good stewards and advocates of what we do.
Love that. I love that how you dug into that. I think it's vital. I think it's a key differentiator. Award-winning is eye-rolling as far as I'm concerned. But yeah.
Yep. We could all write the agency bio on a website from the top of our heads. Like we could all do it. So find a different way to tell that story, and one that is truly a differentiator, and you'll have more success.
Sweet. I love it. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me, for sharing your experience and all the values that you stand for.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks again for tuning in to Agency Bytes. If you know someone with expert knowledge on a topic that agency owners would love to hear about, go to agencyoutsight.com/podcast-guest and nominate them.